good friend of mine, a partner in crime in Leadership Maryland. He's currently the chair. Eric is a wonderful person. Now, he told me to shorten his bio. I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I'll go over what I have in front of you. Eric is president and managing principal of Brotman Financial Group. Brotman Financial Group is an independent firm assisting clients with wealth creation, preservation, and distribution. The next two paragraphs are the expansion of the abbreviations of the letters at the end of his name. and he has about 15 of them, so bypass those. He is certified everything.
Certifiable. Yeah, it's great. Perfect.
If you know him, that's the truth. Eric is currently serving a 4-year term on the Board of Trustees for the Maryland State Retirement and Pension System as an appointee of Governor Larry Hogan. He is also a champion for financial literacy education, serving on the Business Advisory Council for the Comptroller of Maryland, and volunteering for Junior Achievement of Central Maryland and the Eastern Shore. He is a 2009 alumnus and currently serving as chairman on the Board of Directors of Leadership Maryland. In fact, he's the one who wrote me in, making me his vice chair. He's also a 2006 alumnus and former board member of Leadership Baltimore County and the past president and chairman of the board of the Financial Planning Association of Maryland. You get the point that this guy knows what he's talking about and has got many leadership roles. He's a member of the Baltimore Estate Planning Council and the Maryland Chamber of Commerce, where he formerly served as chairman of the Business Development Council. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we can move to the end of the first page.
Oh, stop. It was great. This was a pleasure.
So I'm going to skip over a few of these, but he's a frequent speaker at all kinds of local, regional, and national occasions. He talks about financial planning, business succession planning, and entrepreneurship, all things that are near and dear to our hearts here at Beacon. His most recent book, Retire Wealthy, I need one, the tools you need to help build lasting wealth on your own or with your financial advisor, was published in 2014. Eric, if you get cable, you've seen him on TV. He regularly appears on 11 News Sunday morning on WBAL, and you can also catch those on the website. He's appeared in print in the Wall Street Journal, Baltimore Sun, Baltimore Business Journal, the Daily Record, Smart CEO, Investment Advisor, and more. There's another paragraph there.
Who sent him this?
So I'm skipping another paragraph.
Please.
Eric was named one of the Maryland Power Players by the Gazette of Politics and Businesses in 2010, and one of the very important professionals by the Daily Record in 2011. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Eric Brotman.
I'm sorry to report that I'm out of time. Thank you for having me tonight. This is fun. I had a chance to meet at least half of the room prior to getting started tonight, and have really enjoyed it. I appreciate the invitation memo from Beacon, from Salisbury University, and from the Salisbury Area Chamber of Commerce. So thank you for having me. I'm going to try and accomplish a few things tonight. First, I want to share what I would refer to as an unusual path to where I sit professionally. Certainly a non-traditional path, which gives hope to anyone who loves liberal arts education. They still are useful. Talk a little bit about that, talk a little bit about leadership and entrepreneurship, and then I want to use the last 10 minutes or so to talk about retirement, about investments, particularly looking back to the Great Recession, and then also looking forward a little bit, and I'll leave a little time for Q&A. I have asked several of you not to give me any layups. I want tough questions. You can ask me anything. If I can't answer, I'll ask Memo to answer for me. I think it was because I always had a desire for my own financial independence. So whether I was mowing lawns or shoveling snow, or my first real job at 14 was at Burger King. I now have a business partner who also started at Burger King, so I think that's really where this is built. There's nothing more humbling than being a 14-year-old private school kid cleaning bathrooms at a Burger King for $3.35 an hour to bring you down to earth. I did that. I stocked clothing stores. I did basically anything that I could where folks would hire me. And my father, in his infinite wisdom, took me to a place called Johnson O'Connor Research Center. And if any of you have ever heard of Johnson O'Connor, there are 8 or 10 branches nationwide, but there's one in D.C. and they do a 2-day battery of aptitude tests that is so intense and so exciting that I've sent employees, I've sent potential employees, I've sent friends to this program. And whether you're 14 or 54, your aptitudes don't change. They're always the same. So I went to a day and a half of testing my freshman year of high school, which points you in the direction not only of what you'd be good at, but also what you might enjoy. Because let's face it, nobody wants to do a job they don't like, right? Johnson O'Connor told me a lot of things about myself, but just to give you a sense, every score was on a scale of 1 to 100, where 100 was really brilliant at something and 1 was, well, less so. And the lowest score was tweezer dexterity, where I was a 5. This is why, number 1, I never went to med school or wanted to practice surgery, and number 2, you remember game operation? I was useless. I could not ever get the bone at it and forget it. I couldn't do it. It was my lowest aptitude, but it pointed me in the direction of business and of law. And so my plan was to study economics or potentially to go to law school, and that sort of all made sense. So I applied to 4 schools when it was time to do that, and my first choice school was University of Pennsylvania. Now, Penn was a school for elite students and in many ways elite folks from all over the place, of which I was not. I was a good student, but I wasn't that kind of student. Business getting into that school. But, in the spirit of Michael J. Fox and The Secret of My Success, this was before the internet and so forth, but I called their office twice a week. Even after I got my wait list letter, I called them and said, listen, I'm coming. I need to know my dorm assignment. I'm coming. And I think they finally were sick of hearing from me and acquiesced. Like, I had no business getting in there. I was a 3-2 student. The SATs were good. But I managed to get myself in there, I think, because they said, this kid's hungry and we're going to take him. So I wound up at an Ivy League school with a resume that was good but not Ivy League. I learned a lot, and I am appreciative for that opportunity. But they did hire me as a financial advisor because I was 22. I looked 14. I got carded at the movies. I mean, I could buy a Budweiser, but an R movie was definitely going to involve an ID card. And so I had to figure out what was going to happen next. None of the shops, Morgan Stanley, well, it was Dean Witter at the time, Merrill Lynch, Alex Brown, all the big firms wanted nothing to do with me. And I said, but I know I can do this. This is what I want to do. I'm an English major. I'm 22 years old. I know absolutely no one. I wasn't bringing a book of business, which they were all looking for. So I did the next best thing, which was I went to work for a life insurance company. The application was simple. Question number 1 is full name. Question number 2 was, can you fog a mirror? And the answer was yes to that one. And they said, we'll hire you, but it's straight commission. You'll eat what you kill. You're going to live on that. And I said, okay. And so I started a career with a company called Berkshire Life Insurance Company in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, working in the Baltimore office. And I was getting advice from every place. The first thing they do when you hire a salesperson is, here's project 100 or project 200. List the 200 people you know so you can call and sell them insurance. I'm like, you know what? My friends are 22. They, A, don't need it, and B, if I call them, I won't have any friends anymore. I'm not doing that. So I decided to do 3 things to build a business at 22, largely completely on my own. I joined networking groups and got involved. I was on every membership committee you've ever heard of for everything. Because the ambassadors committee meant I got to say, hi, my name is, here's some tchotchkes, and guess what I do for a living. And this was a good thing. So I joined membership committees. I did trade shows. And I mean, there was no fancy booth. I did trade shows. I showed up and shook hands and kissed babies for 2 and 3 days, and then went back to the office and sent letters, hard copied to everybody, which was thankless, but I learned a lot. I met a lot of people. And then the last thing was I was at a meeting in Pittsfield, and there was a guy by the name of Ron Rubin who sat me down. He's a real successful guy, older than I was, and he said, I'm going to give you 2 pieces of advice. I'm not trying to hurt your feelings, but I'm going to give you 2 pieces of advice. If you take them, I think you're going to be more successful. Oh, yeah, what are they? Whatever. He says, number 1, don't ever wear your school ring again. You look 14. Check. Took that off, put it in a drawer, never wore it again. And he was right. I looked like somebody's grandkid. Second piece of advice was start a group. Start a group like an executive dialogue group where you bring people together who are in different lines of work, and you can all learn from each other, and you can all do business together, and so forth. He said, you don't have to be a mastermind to figure that out. I said, oh, I like that. And so I called it Mastermind, and I should have trademarked it because they're everywhere now. But nonetheless, I created a group. I sent 1,200 letters to attorneys in Central Maryland. It said, I got an idea, can we go to lunch? I took 60 lawyers to lunch, sometimes 3 in one day. There was a place on downtown called Peter's Poorhouse, where I would have an 11:15, a 12:30, and a 1:45. I stayed at the table, I ate soup with one, I ate salad with the next, but I sat with attorneys until I found the person I wanted. It's a true story. I ate all day long, but I met a lot of people. And I found the guy I wanted, and I'm pleased to say that that group has been meeting since April of 1995 on a regular basis. I mean, now some of my lifelong friends. We've been in each other's weddings, we've helped each other professionally, our kids know each other. It's an unbelievable thing. And so that was something I took and I ran with. Well, while I was at Berkshire, and selling life insurance is hard anyway, but in your 20s it's damn near impossible. I made enough of a living to pay rent, and not much more. But while I was there, I had an opportunity. I talked to somebody in the room today who's going to get the opportunity to have a company help them pay for education. They were willing to pay toward my education. So the reason I have a bio that looks like that is because I had a company willing to support me to do that. So CLU, CHFC, CFP, AEP, EIEIO, LMNOF, whatever. It didn't matter what it was. They were going to pay for part of it. I was going to take it. I was going to learn it because I figured I may look like somebody's grandkid, but I know more than them about this, and if I can demonstrate competency, that'll be a good thing. All of which worked reasonably well, and once I got my CFP, which is the Certified Financial Planner piece, which is what I do to this day, it was 1998. There was no way to do this at Berkshire. Berkshire was a life insurance company. They had a broker-dealer. The broker-dealer, her name was Nancy. She was the only employee of the broker-dealer, and when she went to lunch, it was closed. This was not Merrill Lynch. This was find somebody who wants to buy a mutual fund and write it on this application and do a mutual fund. It was amateurish and ridiculous, but again, I learned a lot. And I said, Nancy, thank you, but I'm going to find an organization prepared to handle planning and not just insurance work. And that's when I met David Byrne, who is a good friend, again, a dear friend of this company, and he was starting his own financial planning firm. He was about 10 years older than I. Starting his financial planning firm, and he said, look, I got venture capital. I got money I can do this with, but I'm out of time. I have no infrastructure. I said, that's great, because I'm all sweat equity all the time and don't have a nickel of my name. Let's do it this way. And so we started a firm. We built pro formas. We did the stuff that MBAs do, that Beacon does. We built these pro formas. This is what's going to happen. Here's what revenue's going to do, and so forth. And we are ready. And we moved into our new space. We took a lease. We hired people. March 29th of 2000. Now, for anybody who remembers history, right before the tech bubble imploded, which was March 25th of 2000, 4 days later, we launched a firm. This was both a good thing and a bad thing. It was a good thing because I learned a lot. It was a bad thing because the pro formas were out the window in a week. I mean, you build these 10-year plans. We didn't have a 10-day plan. It was out the door that fast. So I got to learn how to start a firm. I got to learn from one of the best. David's a dear friend. He's a mentor. He was not a teacher. He wasn't someone who sat me down and said, this is how you do it. I just watched. And I watched it all, and I said, first of all, he's great at what he does. And second of all, I can do that. So it created an opportunity where when his firm merged with another, and they said, we are going to change our business model, and we're going to start working with only folks over a certain asset level, and we're going to change what we do. And I said, you guys are going to do great. But most of the families I represent aren't at that asset level. There's no home for me in that business. And they knew it. And I said, well, listen, instead of making this some kind of divorce, let's make it a graduation. I'll set up my own firm. I'll set up my own firm. I'll buy out your interest in our mutual clients. And oh, by the way, if folks show up on your doorstep and they're not the folks you're looking for, send them to me. I'd love to work with them. And they loved it. So that's what we did. So in 2003, I launched Brotman Financial Group with 2 employees, 1,400 square feet of space that I was splitting with another firm. We were on top of each other, but we did it. The clientele that I had been working with in my prior firm came with me. We had $6 million under management. 6. Which is not really enough to start a firm, but it was a start. And so that's how BFG was born. To give you a sense of where we are now, we now have 15 full-time employees, almost 5,000 square feet of space that we're getting ready to expand. We represent 300 multi-generational families in 25 states and manage close to $300 million. And we started with 6 and with 2 people other than myself, and it was 14 years ago. So one of the things that I think has been fun is the way that I met some of the employees who are dear to me. Our chief operating officer, when I met her, was a waitress. She was a waitress at one of my favorite restaurants. I wasn't married, which meant I didn't cook. I was working crazy hours. I was teaching classes at a school in Owings Mills, I won't mention. And during that period of time, I had an opportunity I would go out to dinner. And it was after they were closed. And she would literally have the kitchen save me something to eat, hand me the remote control, and it was like being in my own living room. And she said, so you're starting a company? I said, yeah. She goes, you need to hire anybody? I said, yeah, I'm going to need 1 or 2 people. And I didn't get it. So the next time she says, so how's that hiring coming? I said, oh, it's slow. I haven't found what I'm looking for. She said, can I get an interview? I said, well, do you know anything about financial planning? She said, no, but I can learn. And now she runs the company. Arguably, she's my boss. Wow. She's my right hand. She runs the company. She takes care of HR and IT and the physical plant. She's done back office work. She knows our clients. And I never want to work without her. In fact, we've done things strategically to make sure that she retires about 6 weeks after I do, because I never want to work without her. But it was just a unique way to meet a person who wound up being my right hand at a point in time where, you know, we were starting a firm. It was like Jerry Maguire. It's like, bring the fish. We're going to have down, right? Let's do this. And it was just a great way to get started. So that's Michelle's story and my story. Michelle is going to be doing Leadership Maryland in a year or two, and I know she'll love that. So when thinking about this, the networking group that I joined, the first one, after I joined some local chambers and so forth, I was the only male member of the Executive Women's Network of Baltimore. Now, when I said I joined everything, I joined everything. I got invited by some folks in my mastermind group, and they said, why don't you come? I said, I can't go to that. They said, come. And we went to a place downtown, and there must have been 200 women there. And I knew 40 or 50 of them from like different walks of life. And I was an immediate curiosity. And people were coming up to me. I'm like, well, this is easy. They're coming up to me. And it was like, I usually have to go work a room. So I found out not only could I join, but I decided I'd become a sponsor. I eventually got asked to serve on their board, to chair their corporate membership committee, and to run all of their corporate initiatives. And I had a chance to be on a board where I was the only male in the room of 20. There were some women there who did not want me there, for reasons that are, I guess, clear. It was an amazing opportunity, but what I will tell you is I got to know a little bit of what it was like to be the first woman on the board at IBM in the 70s, with 2 exceptions. There was no cigar smoke in my face and no one grabbed my rear end. So I didn't have that. But I did learn what it was. And I learned how women do business differently than men. I mean, really differently, guys. You need to know this stuff. I could tell you some stuff, but it'll cost you. No. I could go into a guy's office and pound on his desk and say, you're an idiot, you have to do this. You go, well, okay. If you do that over there, please leave. In fact, there's no please, get out of my office. So I also know that 75% of the wealth in this country is controlled by women, and the other 25% will be. So we might as well understand that when you sit down with a couple, which most of our clients are married, not all, but most, and you sit down with a couple and you ask probing questions, like, how long do you plan to be in the house? And they've never been asked this before. And the husband says, we'll be here forever. And the wife says, a year or 2 maybe, tops. And I just look at the husband and say, you best get some boxes because you're moving. He had no idea, but you're moving. You're not in charge of this. So it's been good for me to understand the difference. And for 6 months, so help me, I'd be at the grocery store. I'd be walking in the grocery store and you know, I'm not dressed for grocery, I'm dressed, and some woman would come and you're that guy, you're that guy. Yes, I am, I'm that guy. Fortunately, it did nothing to damage my reputation. I have some wonderful friends and clients and colleagues from that group, but I got a real taste. I got a taste of being a minority. I got a taste of being in a place where not everybody wanted me and was comfortable with me, but I also got a taste about how half of this country does business. And it's different. And in family planning, if it doesn't matter what the husband says, if the wife doesn't like you, they are not doing business with you. So it is real important to have that kind of relation. I learned a lot, and it was one of the most impactful things I ever did. So Executive Women's Network of Baltimore, I have A lot of fond memories of that, and of course people thought it was strange and opportunistic, but the reality is it was really a great learning opportunity. So that's what I'll call showing up. You know, half of the job, any job, if you want to be successful, I believe, is showing up. You have to be there. If you're sitting home, you're not going to do anything. You have to be there. You guys are all here. Half of it showing up. The other half is the GIGO effect. Garbage in, garbage out. You're going to get out of something what you put into it. If you join the Chamber of Commerce or a nonprofit board or a leadership group or anything else, and you join and never show up, you're wasting your money. Phones don't ring for that. You're not going to meet people, you're not going to build relationships, so half of it's showing up, half of it's what you put into it, and to give you a sense, this is the part of my story that makes me feel a little bit like Forrest Gump. If you remember the movie, he wound up in some fairly strange situations, one after the other, and I think in some ways I did too. My mastermind group, which I talked about a little bit, one of the women in the mastermind group had done Leadership Howard County. I've never heard of it. And she's telling us about it. I said, wow, that's pretty powerful. She said, it's the best thing I've done in my career. This is a great thing. I said, but that's great, but I'm not in Howard County. She goes, well, I bet there's one near you. So I Googled Leadership Baltimore County. Perfect, I applied. I'd never heard of it. I applied, and I go in for an interview, and I'm interviewing them, and they're interviewing me, and I wound up doing that in 2006. And Leadership Baltimore County introduced me to Leadership Maryland, which has been an important moment in my career. But in the opening retreat in leadership, I know there's some Leadership Maryland grads here, at least two more. Any others? Two? Okay, two. There should be others. This is worth doing, by the way. But in the opening retreat, we were asked by our facilitator, dream big. What would you like to do? Dream big. And I said, I'd like to write a book. I'd like to make a difference. I'd like to put something out there. I'd like to write a book. I didn't even know what that meant or what was involved, but it sounded like a good thing, and I'm going to do this. 6 months later, in the program, I got a call from somebody in Florida who was running a publishing company and wanted to hire me to write a book. Now, that doesn't just happen. That's karma or kismet or something. But they wanted me to write a book on how to get out of debt and stay out of debt. So my first book, I was an author for hire. I got paid not a ton of money, but I learned how to write a book. And I wrote it in Ocean City, because I do all my writing in Ocean City. And it's called Debt Free for Life, the tools you need to free yourself from debt. And I will tell you, it was not a Grisham novel, and it was not a bestseller. But I learned how to write a book, which is a real, it's different than writing your thesis or writing a paper in school. It's a different undertaking. So right around that same time, I had an experience, again in Leadership Maryland, an unbelievable experience. My wife and I found out we were expecting our first child. And several days later, I found out I had malignant melanoma. And the first thing I did, of course, was look up, what is malignant melanoma? And of course, if you go on the website, you're planning your funeral. The best advice I ever got from somebody was don't ever go online about anything like that, because it's always the worst case and so forth. So on July 1st of 2009, in the middle of that year, I had surgery on my head, which thankfully was clean, and I'm cancer-free and very lucky. I'm done with oncology and all of that. But I had this incredible moment where I thought, I may not meet my daughter. She may not know me. Do I videotape myself? How do I cope with that? And it made me feel like the most important thing I could do for not just myself, but for our client families, is make sure you create a legacy. And a legacy is more than money. It's not what you leave behind. It's the stories, it's the values, it's the stuff. I have an incredible colleague of mine, and on our website you'll see a tab for Acknowledged Media. And this is not a business venture of mine. I serve on this advisory board. I just happen to think it's amazing. But what they do is they do legacy videos, where they allow folks, while they're living, to tell the stories. I gave one to each of my parents, and now have videos that my daughter will know them. She doesn't know her other grandfather. She doesn't remember. She'll always know them. We'll have this forever. And it's the kind of thing that we were able to bring to folks, again, not for profit, but for making an impact and making a difference. I'm delighted to say my daughter is 7 now, and though she's not in the business yet, there's hope for her. So the other piece of this, I'm an English major. Now I'm writing books. Perfect. I'm using my English major. What else am I doing? I'm teaching. I'm teaching the Certified Financial Planning Program at Village Uli at the time. And by virtue of getting involved there, I wound up ultimately becoming on the Board of Trustees for Stevenson, which I love. I chair the University Advancement Committee. I'm involved with raising money for scholarships and doing gap scholarships. And I know at the lacrosse games I'm on the wrong side of most of you guys right now. But I am a free agent in a few years and not above that. So I am in fact available in a few years. What I would say is that led to the Leadership Maryland piece, the Stevenson piece. Because of Leadership Maryland, I got a chance to meet some folks. I now serve on the Comptroller's Advisory Council, which is fantastic. I'm getting to know Annapolis a little bit. I know enough about Annapolis to know a few things, but the biggest is I never want to run for any office ever of any kind. I have no political aspirations of any kind. The other thing, I got nominated by Peter Franchot to serve on the Maryland State Retiree Pension Board. Now Peter's a Democrat. And he says to me, he says, you are a Republican, right? I said, yeah. He goes, good, I want to talk to you about something. Which meant that they needed a Republican on their board, and he liked me enough to do it. So I got nominated by a Democrat, I got appointed by Larry Hogan, a Republican. I'm Switzerland. I can work with any of these folks. This is good. I haven't run for office, I'm not slinging mud at anybody, I can work with both parties, this is a good thing. It's another shot at making a difference. I'm involved in managing a $50 billion portfolio for all of our firefighters and police officers and teachers and correction officers and folks around the state employees. And it's a plan, and we're going to talk a little bit about pensions later. It's a plan with some problems. There's no question about it. It's a hard thing. But I'm trying to lend a financial perspective to it because most of the folks on the board, Peter joked this morning in a meeting, he said most of us don't know finance at all. We're appointed by our unions or by this group or that group, but we need folks who really understand the math to work with the actuaries and the other folks. So we're doing that. So now let's think about this. Use my English. Got a book? Great. I wrote a second book. And the second book I wrote and self-published, because again, this is not Grisham. I have not been on the bestseller list yet, but I wrote a book called Retire Wealthy. And it's a play on words, because I want to help folks redefine what it means to be retired. Let's think about it. What does it mean to retire? What's the definition of retire? Look it up. You guys have phones? Look up the definition of retire. What it is to retreat or disappear. I don't know about you guys, but that doesn't sound appealing in the slightest way. Who the hell wants to retreat and disappear? So I believe retirement is not the absence of work. It's the absence of needing to work. It's being financially independent to the point where one of my clients, I know we're being filmed, but he called it KM, hey money, which was kiss my money, which was the you can take this job and shove it kind of situation, where I've now hit financial independence where I don't need this job, I want this, I want to do something, I want to make a difference, whether it's volunteering or working. The idea that you're working because you love something is totally different than you're working because you got to make them work. Totally different. So we're helping families redefine retirement. Retirement to me is graduation. In fact, that's in the can now. The next book is going to be Don't Retire, Graduate. Please don't trademark that, because I'm working on it. But the whole premise is, memo. When you retire, my friend, I expect Memo Derricker 2.0. I do not expect Oprah and Shuffleboard. It's not going to work. It makes no sense to retreat and disappear. It makes sense to be in a position where you can make a difference, where you have capital, where you have opportunity. So that's the first piece. And the other thing is, well, what's it mean to be wealthy? What's wealthy? Am I wealthy? Are you wealthy? I quote in my book, I quote a philosopher who I sometimes go to for advice. His name is Chris Rock. And what Chris Rock said, among other things that are more colorful than I'm going to share tonight, but one of the things that he said about wealth is, if Bill Gates woke up tomorrow with Oprah's balance sheet, he'd want to jump out a window. I'd get by on what Oprah's worth. I really would. I'd get by and then some. So wealth is relative. The concept of wealth is, to me, there's so many different ways to live wealth. And money is only one of them. So let's rethink retirement. All right? But now we have to do some math. And we got to think, well, what is the financial world really going to say about this? In order to do retirement planning, clearly you have to do some math. Even as an administrator, you have to do some math. Fine. Let's think about where you get financial advice. Where does financial advice come from? In the 20s, in 29, when the Depression hit, legislation began to protect consumers from that kind of event. We saw it again in 2009, by the way, but Glass-Steagall. Anybody heard of Glass-Steagall? The Glass-Steagall Act was passed in the early 30s, and what it said was to protect consumers, banks can only do banking. They're not allowed to do insurance work, and they're not allowed to do investments. And insurance companies can do insurance, but they can't do investment management, they can't do banking. And of course, investment management firms can do investment management, but they're not allowed to do banking or insurance anymore. So now it's 1938. You've got $10,000, which was a hell of a lot of money in 1938. It didn't matter where you went. You got bad advice. Because if you went to your stockbroker said, we're going to get you the best return, banks aren't paying enough interest, and insurance is a terrible deal. If you took the same $10,000 next door to the bank's going to say, stocks are too risky. What you need is FDIC insurance. You don't want that. We got to put you in insurance because that's going to protect you. And by the way, life insurance is a terrible deal. And you take the same $10,000 to your insurance agent, they're going to say, you know, cash isn't paying much, stocks are too risky. You should buy nothing but whole life insurance, and that's all you should have for everything. And no matter where you went, the advice was bad. It was bad advice. None of those folks worked together. None of them said, you know, you ought to do some of this, and then you ought to go see the guy or gal next door. It just didn't happen because everybody wanted that wallet share, even in the 30s. So fast forward, you know the name Sandy Weil? Sandy Weil was chairman of Citigroup. Citigroup said, we're going to buy an insurance company, we're going to buy a bank, we're going to buy an investment company, and we're going to work together, come and get us. And Glass-Steagall fell in the 90s. This abomination of the law lasted for 55 or so years. It hurt a lot of people. Now, fast forward, now Citigroup says we can do it all. But can they do it well? Now you went to your insurance agent said, buy some life insurance, but guess what? I got some stocks for you too. And I'm not sure which was worse. The fact that now your insurance agent is selling stocks, or the fact that they can. So anywhere you went now, it was everyone's trying to do everything, and again, none of them did it particularly well. So where do you go for advice? To this day, where do you go for advice? I believe it's important to have all of those bases covered, and I believe that you should have a huddle of advisors. You should have specialists in insurance and investments and banking and real estate and mortgages and debt and all these folks. And if you have all those folks, do they know what one another are doing? So what I try to do and what I believe CFPs, independent CFPs, should be doing for their clients, we're the offensive coordinator. It's your huddle, it's your money, you're the quarterback. But we need to call the play so that all the folks in the huddle know what the play is. Because remember we talked about what happens when you accidentally name the wrong beneficiary on something? Well, if you have a spectacular estate plan and a great will, but you're naming the wrong person on your employee benefit sheet, it's all out the window. If your CPA is doing a great job with your tax returns, but you're creating lots of transactions and paying a lot of taxes, you're not helping matters. These people need to know each other. They need to work together. It needs to be a huddle. You can't just say, hey, you're the bottle cap, you're the twig, go deep. It doesn't work. Okay? So let's talk about generations, because there's different generations in this room. Everybody likes to beat on the millennials, so I'll join in. Sorry, millennial. But let's begin with Roy Rogers and Dale Evans. Roy Rogers and Dale Evans making movies, black and white movies. What was the highest marginal tax bracket in the United States when they were making movies? Anybody know? Staff, anything.
28.
25, 48?
28.
91%. Federal income taxes were 91% at that point, and everything was deductible. I mean, everything. So you had an entire generation that had two choices. We can save 9 cents or spend $1. What do you think people did? Spend $1. Why in the world would you save 9 cents if you could spend $1? So now these folks were reliant on pensions and Social Security more than they should have been because there was such an incredible disincentive to save. There was no good reason to save money. In fact, it was almost impossible. So now we get to a point where you got a whole generation relying on Social Security and pensions, so let's talk about Social Security. When Social Security was created, 65 was old. 65 is not old, all right? Yeah, and 65 was old to the point where most people, a lot of folks didn't go to college either. So you'd get your high school degree, you'd get a job, you're 18 years old, you'd work from 18 to 65, you'd retire, and by 72 you were dead. So you worked for almost 40 years, you retired for 7. Well, that's solvent, that'll work. Today, people don't hit the workforce till 22, 23, 25. Oh, by the way, they're $100,000 in debt from student loans. And they want to retire at 55 and they live to be 107. I got bad news. That is not what's happening. That is not what's coming. You know, it's not possible. It's not possible for Social Security to do what it was intended to do without things that are very easy to solve if you're not running for office. If you're running for office, they're almost impossible. The good news, if there's good news, is that the baby boomers are going to control everything soon, at least for a while, until the millennials take over. And for those Gen Xers, and any other Gen Xers like me, we're in deep trouble. Because we don't have any voice ever and won't for our entire lives. The boomers are going to, you're going to see more assisted living and CCRC and more things that cater to a senior population that's growing because our senior population is growing. And they're a huge voting bloc. And the biggest voting bloc after them right now, half of them are working in a different job every 6 months, and the other half are in their parents' basement, but I promise you they will eventually get to the point where they're launching, right? Okay, so we've redefined retirement. Now we also have to talk about education. We're at Salisbury, let's talk about education. In my mind, the idea that education is going to be 4 years and then grad school and then out, and that you're going to borrow all that money, I think that's, as millennials might say, it's an epic fail. Because if the skills you have at 22 don't translate when you're 52, you will eventually be unemployable, well before you're financially independent. So I think we're going to see education become much more of a continuum. I think we're going to see lifetime learners. Memo was joking with me that I'm a lifetime learner, but it's true. But I believe that we'll see folks who won't necessarily do 4 years and then look for a job in the traditional "this is the way it works" sense, because it's not 1970 anymore. It's not 1990 anymore. Hell, it's not even 2010 anymore. I think we're going to see a continuum of education, a continuum of jobs. We're going to continue to see free agency, and it would shock me. It would shock me if we don't see major changes to the pension and Social Security system. Major. It has to happen. Companies figured it out forever ago. And the companies who did that, for the employees who were already retired, most of them made out okay. For the folks 5 or 10 years from retirement, most of them got really hurt because they were expecting that. You've heard of the three-legged stool? The three-legged stool is the diagram that says, here's what you're going to retire on. We got government, which is Social Security. We've got your company, which is the pension. Comes with the gold watch and the thank you for coming and the cake. And then you've got whatever you saved yourself. Traditionally, you needed to save 10%. Today, 70, 75, 80. Today, Social Security is at risk for everybody under, I believe, 45, at least in some level. And pensions are, other than state government, they're really not here, and they may be going away as well at some point. We'll see. There are states who are switching to defined contributions. I'm not giving you inside information on our board. Do not quote me on that. However, I'm seeing other states do it, and it wouldn't surprise me if there became pressure to do that. All right? So you're on your own. Instead of a three-legged stool, retirement is now a yo-yo. You are on your own, and that is it. So let's talk about what it means to get there. How do you do it? Some of you might remember the Great Recession. Some of you were working 10 years ago, most of you. You remember what it did to companies, what it did to homeowners, what it did to savers, what it did to retirees, what it did to a lot of folks. So let's talk about it. There were 3 different kinds of people when 2008 hit, and markets dropped, in some cases, 40% in 6 weeks, which is really unbelievable when you think about it. There were buyers, there were holders, and there were sellers. For buyers, this was the greatest opportunity of their lives. People who were buying either every paycheck or who had money on the sidelines, they could throw them. This was the greatest deal ever. Holders lost 5 years, which means for folks who were holding on and they were 52 thinking they were done at 65, well now it's 70. They lost 5 years. Sellers will never recover. Folks who used a total return portfolio strategy, where they had stocks and bonds and all kinds of things in one portfolio, they were drawing their 3 or 4% income or whatever they were drawing, and they were drawing against a balance that dropped like that, they'll never recover. And so everyone had a different experience in that period of time. Now, I don't know whether that can happen again. Some things you never thought you'd see. I didn't expect to see Merrill Lynch a week from not existing. Merrill Lynch was in trouble until Bank of America stepped in. The idea of too big to fail is a political hot potato and a problem, but the reality is there were folks who really, really got hurt, and a lot of it was behavioral. So now let's use some of that psychology. How do you protect people from doing the exact wrong thing at the exact wrong time because it's human nature to do it? All right? Let's do a little math. Anybody, if you have scratch paper, use it. If not, we're going to do some mental calisthenics. This is easy math, I promise. Everybody in this room is about to invest $10,000. Not literally, that's probably illegal. But you're going to invest $10,000 for 2 years. And in the first year, you're going to enjoy 100% return. I'm sorry, let's not do it that way. That's too easy. Let's do it differently. In the first year, you're going to get a 50% return. In the second year, you're going to get a 50% loss. So $10,000, first year you get 50% on your money. Second year you lose 50%. How much money do you have?
$7,500.
Okay. What's the average annual rate of return of that portfolio? You. When a mutual fund or other investment reports on average returns, they are arithmetic, which means if you gain 50 one year and lose 50 the next year, the average returns are 0. But you don't have the same amount of money. It's not like 0 and 0. You have $7,500. And it doesn't matter. You can do it the other way too. We could lose first and then gain. It doesn't matter. You're still at a loss. Not only that, but the year in which you had gains, you might have paid taxes on them. And the year in which you got the loss, you may or may not get to use it. So it's worse than that. And if you were doing that at the same time as you were pulling 3 or 4% out, you have far less than $7,500. So how do you handle that? And the way I believe to handle that is asset segmentation. It is deconstructing portfolios to not use total return calisthenics. And that means having certain dollars that are set aside for certain periods of time with certain types of risk so that you don't have to sell anything low. I'm oversimplifying, but the fact is, if you're 55 plus, you should have 10 years worth of money where you know where your income's coming from if you have to retire tomorrow. So that there's enough time that if we have another type of 2008, the money that's at risk, you're a holder, not a seller. You might lose a little time, but you cannot be a seller. You cannot sell from a portfolio that's down or you will not recover. Now, there were folks in November of 09, or moving forward into 09, who started selling at exactly the wrong time. It's human nature. But let's think about what happens in some of these funds. Where are interest rates going? Going up or down? How many say up? In the next 5 years, we're going to have higher interest rates, yes or no? Yes? Okay. Anybody say no, we won't? So it's unanimous. Okay. So if interest rates are going up, what's going to happen to bonds? What's going to happen to bond prices? They're going to go down. Do you own bonds? Okay. So knowing that the bonds are going to drop in value, what do you do to protect yourself? Do you own individual bonds or bond funds? See, if you own an individual bond and you hold it to maturity, you don't care what the market value is, as long as it doesn't default. Right? If you put $10,000 into a bond paying 3% for 5 years, and 2 years later, interest rates are way up and the value of the bond is down, don't sell it. Use the income from it, let it mature, get your money back, you got the deal you signed up for. But if you're in a bond fund, you don't have that choice because other people are going to do the exact wrong thing at the exact wrong time When interest rates go up and the value of a bond fund starts to drop, you're going to want to hold it. Your neighbor's going to start selling it in their 401k because they think it's lousy, and the value of your investment is going to drop because of somebody else's bad behavior. It's crazy, but that's what's going to happen. So if you're in bond funds like that, think about holding various types of securities to maturity so that you don't get hurt by rising interest rates. I agree with you, they're going to go up. I don't know how much, I don't know how soon, I don't know for how long. I have a mortgage broker I do a bunch of work with who has a significant and beautiful crystal ball on his desk. I love it. And on that crystal ball, he has a yellow sticky that just says out of order. And he swears he can't get parts for it, so it's just done. The reality is none of us know what's coming. But there are ways to protect yourselves. There are ways to protect yourselves to make sure that you're still growing your wealth without putting it in a coffee can on the swing set. I'm not saying go to cash, don't try and time anything. You're as likely to be wrong as right. All right. So what is happening moving forward? First of all, if you don't have that person in your ear telling all your folks what to do, find him or her. Because they're going to need to know what one another are doing. But beyond that, the best reason to hire a professional isn't because they can pick better than you. Maybe they can. You can pick yourself. But it's because they can talk you off the ledge at the exact moment where you're about to do what is naturally and instinctive for us to do. Any of you gamble? You don't have to admit. But if you ever happen to, so some of you admit, okay. When you're at a casino, you're playing $10 blackjack, and you're up $100. Do you ever have a tendency to go, well, that's not my money. That's a casino money. It's house money. No, it's not. It's your money. Put it in your pocket. Go get lunch. But no one does. If they win, they have this extra. They're like, it's house money. I can just keep using it, right, until you lose. Until you're $100 down, and then you're like, well, I gotta get my money back. Let's double it up. That's why casinos have fountains in their lobby. Because they know how this works. It's behavioral finance. All right? And that's not saying gambling's good, bad, or sideways. If you know how it works, and you can have somebody over your shoulder tapping you, usually it's a spouse, tapping you, stop doing that right now. If you have the discipline to pocket the $50 you just want to get a sandwich, you win. Doesn't happen for everybody. So what's coming? There are 3 major events coming in the next 12 to 15 months that are going to impact all of us, and they're hard to determine how they're going to impact us, but they're going to impact us, right? First one is the stimulus packages. All the quantitative easing is about to start to be undone. And while that easing process was one we weren't sure how it would work, arguably it served its purpose. It kept the economy out of trouble. It kept interest rates low, maybe artificially, maybe not, but it did what it was supposed to do. Now we're going to undo it. And do you know how that's going to play out? If you do, would you please tell me? Because I'm not sure, because it's unprecedented. We don't know exactly what's going to happen. We think interest rates will go up, but again, we don't know by how much. You're taking a major buyer out of the marketplace. If you're taking a major buyer out of the marketplace, and there's less demand, what's going to happen with pricing? With less demand, you should expect to see prices fall, right? Interest rates go up. Second thing that's going to happen is we have equity markets that have largely already priced in corporate tax reform. Corporate tax reform is on the table. Everybody thinks this is going to happen. It's going from 35 to 15. Woohoo! Everybody's going to have extra money. It's going to be great for the stock market, except for one thing. It hasn't passed yet. And it may or may not. And I'm not here to take sides. I'm here to know that if it passes, we've already priced it in. Maybe it leads to the next big bump. But if it doesn't pass, and we've already priced it in, that's where you're going to see a downturn, in my opinion. And it could be significant. I'm not guessing at the size or the duration or anything. I'm just knowing that if you're anywhere near retirement age and you're not a buyer, you ought to be segregating assets. Just the way we talk. If you're a buyer, have a ball. It's going to be great for the buyers. But if you're not a buyer, you don't want to do it that way. And what's the third thing? Well, the third thing is, I can't believe it. We're going to have midterm elections. We're going to go through this again. All of us are going to be bombarded with ads and bombarded with all the election type stuff. And of course, none of us know what's going to happen. But in general, in an election year, there's some form of gridlock, which means we don't know exactly what's going to happen during that year. A lot of things can't happen because everybody's running for re-election. And then right after that occurs, do all the incumbents get voted out? Does some stay? Does one party take control or the other party take control? What tends to happen is as soon as there's a sense of what's coming in November, And this will happen in May. Markets will start to price based on what they think is going to happen in 6 months. And I don't know about you, but sometimes you don't know who's going to win an election until the votes are counted. Sometimes there are surprises. So, I would say that we've enjoyed a 9-year run, a really good one. The things that could keep it going are largely already spent. So while I'm not calling for doom and gloom, I am saying be prepared. It's going to happen again, and be prepared intellectually and emotionally for what it's going to feel like. We've been there before. We can do this, but we can't do it the same way we tried to do it the first time. All right? We need to do it differently. So I'm going to leave you with a couple of things. First of all, what's next? We talked about the economy, we talked about the markets. I'll do some Q&A. What's next for us, for our firm? And for me, I would very much like at some point to serve on a public board. It's the only thing I've never done. So that's kind of neat. I would like to do that. I'm looking at shore leadership because, as I mentioned to some folks here, I have a place in Ocean City. I love it down here. I want to spend more time down here all year round. I do have a 7-year-old, so I'm not moving anytime soon, but that's something I'm definitely looking at. Our company's going to keep adding about 24 new families to our client roll every year, and we think that's sustainable growth. And we're going to take on more space and maybe at some point a second office, which definitely would look nice this side of the bridge. So I'm going to tie together English, psychology, business, and life with a quote from maybe the most impactful book I've ever read. There are several, but one, which I read in high school, which maybe junior high school, and I bet most of you read it. You read Catcher in the Rye? Mm-hmm. So you know Holden Caulfield's job. What was Holden Caulfield's calling? It was to protect people from falling. That's largely why I do what I do for a living. I feel like I'm sitting on the edge, watching folks do what they maybe should or shouldn't do, and I'm going to try and catch them. But you remember Holden Caulfield's teacher? Who's his teacher's name? Mr. Antonelli. Mr. Antonelli said something that I'm going to leave you with tonight because I think it's really impactful, and I'll bet it will resonate with this whole room. And that is, the mark of an immature man is to die nobly for a cause. The mark of a mature man is to live humbly for one. And I challenge you to do that. Thank you very much. I'll be happy to answer any questions, but if they're too easy, you need to try to stump me a little bit. About anything. Entrepreneurship, leadership, my place at the shore, whatever you want. Anything?
So you and I
we got one right here.
I'll start with an easy one. It's not softball, but about your company.
Yes, sir.
There at the end, you just said that we're going to try to grow at a pace that we're comfortable with, getting 24 clients or families a year.
Yep.
Why did you choose 24 and why that few, I guess?
Well, it's a great question. First of all, 2 a month is about what we can do because for us to onboard a client usually requires 4 to 5 meetings and 15 to 20 hours worth of work. Because we get involved in all those details, it's not a handshake and here let's move some accounts or let's do something. It's like a reconnaissance mission. You know, we send out a questionnaire and people first have to find everything. We've got to take inventory and then we build a model that is uniquely ours. It's different than the 100-page plans that you've seen various places because it's a true model, a true sample. And what we'll do with that is we'll mark it initial. And I'll tell everybody, this is the condition in which we found you. Now let's try and improve on this condition. And so it takes a long time. Our intakes are, they're pretty intense. So think about it this way. To use a medical analogy, I like to use medical analogies a lot because we've all been to doctors, we get this, right? We are primary care physicians. We're also concierge physicians. So in other words, we're not trying to see 6 patients an hour. We're going to spend hours with you, right? We're also generalists. We're not specialists. So we're going to do the full physical exam and then say, hey, you need podiatry and cardiology. You know, a lot of people don't know which specialists they need. And like I said earlier, I don't think you can be good at everything. There's no one company or one individual or one anybody who can be good at all those things. So can you be a generalist and find the right specialist, whether it's tax or real estate or law or whatever? I believe that's possible. But yeah, our intakes are extensive. It's a physical exam. We tell everybody it's as intimate as medicine with absolutely no hospital gown. No hospital gown, no disrobing, usually. Other questions? Sir?
Eric, this is a very selfish question because at the universities, at the business school, we deal with millennials all the time. And one of the things we've started noticing in this community is that our earlier millennials are now really beginning to launch.
Mm-hmm.
And they are becoming pretty much the hope of our future.
No question.
It is interesting how these young people that we used to joke about are now becoming leaders in our communities. People in this room, in fact some of them are in this room, you know who I'm talking about. I'm talking about the Kim Gillises of this world, Jake Gays of this world. And they are giving us hope for the future. In some ways they're also making us look in the mirror in a very bad way and realizing our mistakes. But what advice would you give, A, to those millennials who are launching, and B, to us boomers who are working with them? And I'm still ignoring the Gen X's.
Sure. Well, I'm used to it. Thank you. For millennials, I think there are a couple things. First of all, I think we have to be real careful where we attend school and what it's going to cost and what we're borrowing. You know, and one of the things that every university wrestles with is cost points and price points, but there are enormous resources at all the different schools, but I think to come out of school with a huge debt is such a disadvantage that it's not insurmountable, but it's tough. I'll give you an example. We had folks approach us and say, you know, we'd like some help with our finances. This was a doctor and a lawyer. They were both 2 years out of grad school. They were both making good money. Things were going great for them. They had $500,000 in student loans. They borrowed all 4 years of undergrad and all their graduate schools from expensive schools, GW and all over. They had $500,000. I said, well, that is arguably a 30-year mortgage without a good tax break. You'll be paying for that when you have your own children and you're paying for them. It was $3,500 a month for the next 30 years. To me, that doesn't make sense. You know, it's kind of like if you're in a hole, first stop digging and assess your situation. So that's the first thing I say is be real careful with student debt, particularly for undergrad. Graduate school is more of an investment. Undergrad, arguably, you're learning how to do your own laundry. I'm oversimplifying, sorry. Secondly, I would say in terms of employment, the biggest thing that millennials do that Xers and boomers and others don't do is that millennials change jobs a lot. Job jumping, in order to move out, you have to move up, and this idea that you're constantly changing jobs. The problem is so much of our retirement and of our benefits are tied to things that vest over time. So if you change jobs because you're getting a nominal increase in pay, but you're leaving several years of employer contributions on the table in a 401k someplace, you may not have done yourself any favors. So you really need to understand how your benefits work. I think you really need to understand what the total compensation package is, not just what it says gross and net on a paycheck. There's a lot more that goes into it, and some of it's obvious, like who's paying for health insurance, who's paying for various things, but there's more to it than that. There's also is there a profit share? Are there stock options? Are there things that need to vest? I mean, in 2000, we saw folks who, at the time, and these were Xers, which is probably why they're both small and bitter. The Xers were worth $5 million in company stock that went to zero overnight, and suddenly they were looking for work. And those dot bombs were bad news. Today, we don't have that. But we definitely have millennials who every 2-3 years are leaving work and they're leaving money on the table and don't know it or don't understand it. So those are the first two things I'd say. And if there was a third, if your parents don't mind you staying home for a year or two, it's not the worst thing in the world. I know the boomerang thing, everybody jokes about it, but to put some money together so that you can launch favorably and be debt-free is not necessarily a bad thing if you're blessed to have that kind of relationship. If you get teased, it's by folks who wish they had your rent payment. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
What would you say to the young people that turn to us, older generation, and say, why don't you retire so that I can have your job?
First of all, while it's thoughtful of them to ask you to do that, because they're just looking out for you, clearly. I would say in 2007 there were a lot of people who expected to do that who then couldn't. I also think that for folks who are in the last X number of years of a career, I don't know what it feels like to be ready to retire. I've helped dozens of people do it, but I have no idea what it feels like. And I have a feeling that we tie so much, especially as Americans, and I think it's probably worse for men than women, but it's true across the board. We tie who we are to what we do in an unbelievably profound way. So people say, who are you? I'm an accountant, I'm a zoologist, whatever it is, but who are you? We tie so much of our worth to what we do for a living, and the idea of giving that up is, I have to imagine, it's very, very difficult. So what I would tell young people, after I laughed and said no, I would say that you will do your best to empathize with them and you understand what they're hoping to do, but there's also a position that ideally they would also empathize with you, that you're feeling something they can't fathom. And it's a difficult thing. People who are used to being, you don't go from 60 or 70 hours a week to idle. You have got to have a plan, and it doesn't have to be financial. What do you want to be when you grow up? Figure that out first. Because if you find something you love to do that you can afford to do, whether it's for income or not, then you have that choice. But until that point, don't retire too soon. People who retire without a plan don't live very long, regardless of their wealth. They don't live very long. Your only hobby cannot be, ice cream parlors and Fox News. That is not good for you. In general. Yes, ma'am.
What would you recommend looking at our children's age in their 30s? What would you tell them to start planning for their futures? Most retirement people look at 55 and older. What would you tell that small group in their 30s to do?
Well, first, I'd tell them to start immediately. Because the one thing we can't bottle is time. And when time's on your side, it's the time to do it. For people who start early enough, the game becomes much easier. It's almost like it's rigged in your favor. Because of compounding, because of time value of money, because of all these various things. So, I would say the very first thing is to be debt-free, at least of adverse debt. I don't mean a mortgage, I don't mean a car payment, but if you've got a Macy's card with a balance on it, stop. I would also say at some point there's, again, the student loan piece, reconfigure what you can get out of it. Get to zero and then start building some wealth. Take advantage, even if you are in debt, take advantage of any company match. It's free money, it's a tax-deferred raise. Take it, no matter what. If they match 50 cents on the dollar up to 6%, that's 3% of your income that you're not currently paying taxes on, that can grow, if you're 25, it can grow for the next 45 years before you're forced to touch it. That's real. And I would say consider getting some advice. If any of you have kids in their 20s or 30s and you work with someone who does what I do, have them work with your kids. And ideally, have someone else in their office work with their kids. Because I don't know about you, nobody wants to work with their parents' advisor. I'm the old guy in the corner office. We have millennials who work with our millennials because they speak the same language. I don't get it. And it's okay. I don't have to get it. They have no idea what it was like to to have a dot matrix printer and to turn it in. You didn't have a cell phone. How in the world did you find each other? We said we'd meet at 9. All right, well, thank you. This was a ton of fun. You guys are awesome.
So, first of all, Eric, thank you very, very much for the presentation. But that's not the only reason you're here. Every year, Beacon selects one individual that we work with, and we recognize them for contributions they've made to the community at large, to their industry, and to the kinds of projects we at Beacon do. We used to call this the Beacon Star Award. This year we've changed it. This is the first inaugural Leading Beacon Award. And truly, Eric is a leading beacon for many, many people, not the least of which at Leadership Maryland, the board he chairs. So, Eric, you get to get this thing, which you just don't drop it on your foot.
Yeah, what's that?
Eric,
Thank you.
this is the very first Leading Beacon Award 2017, and my friend, you're it.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank the Academy. Thank you. That was very thoughtful.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Well,
I know.
Oh my God.